Welcome everybody. I have not done a video in a while, so it felt like the right time to kind of catch up on the energies. It's been a really interesting last 6 months, because obviously 2025, lot to say about 2025, but we were in a universal 9 year. And we were in a wood snake year. And the 9 years are always about some sort of culmination point. There can be a mixed bag in the 9 years. It's a feeling of completion. It's a feeling of I fulfilled, whatever we were working towards or working on in the past 9 year cycle, which did begin in 2017. And there's also this feeling of a void space, because when things are fulfilled, when things reach the end of the line, when a story comes to a conclusion, there is this sense of excitement for what's next, but then there's also kind of this sense of grief and loss, because in order to move into a new era or a new cycle or a new chapter, you have to leave something behind. And that was a huge theme of the wood snake 9 year. And not to mention that we had a brief moment in time in 2025 where the outer planets, which I've been talking about, all of 2025, and how they were all moving into a new sign in the same year, which is very, very rare. This does not happen often just because they all have very different orbits, right? So we had a brief moment, specifically June, July, and August of 2025, where we had Pluto in Aquarius, we had Saturn and Neptune in Aries, we had Uranus and Gemini. Uranus and Gemini didn't hit till July, but we had this moment of time where the new energy was coming in, but then in the fall, they all went retrograde back to their previous signs, minus Pluto. And so we were kind of thrust into this new energy, and then we had to backtrack. And then we had to now go back and unpack the baggage, basically, of everything that wasn't going to align to this new frequency, right? So it's almost like receiving a jolt of new energy, but now you have to go back and integrate that. And that's pretty much what we've been doing the last 6 months. Now we're officially in 2026. We are in the main event of 2026, which is February. So for one, we're in a one universal year. So this begins a new era. This begins a new cycle. We typically move in these 9 year cycles, right? The one energy is always about action, momentum, fresh starts, new pathways, new opportunities, new directions. The 1 years require for us to move. That might mean physically, but we've got to start taking action. We've got to choose a direction, and we have to start initiating towards that. Now, the Chinese New Year, which this year does not begin till February 17th, is the fire horse year. Very different than the wood snake energy. So the fire horse is fast, man. It's a fast-paced archetype. So shout out to all my horses out there. We do get every 12 years, you will get a return of your Chinese archetype, and it is not necessarily promises to be a good year, but we are very aligned with the energy of the year. The horse wants freedom. The horse wants to run. The horse does not really want to be tamed. So there's a wildness, especially with the fire element of this. There is a wild, untamed, bold, autonomous energy that is going to really not kick off until the Chinese New Year, February 17th. Now, what makes February even more interesting is this is the month where we're having the big event. Saturn and Neptune conjunct at the 0 degrees of Aries. This is rare. this doesn't happen. I know for the last couple of years, I feel like every astrologer is kind of like, we're like screaming into the void of like, this never happens. It's just a lot of rarefied astrology. And it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. I've seen a lot of astrologers trying to track back to the last time that Saturn and Neptune were conjunct at this particular degree of Aries, right? Because Saturn and Neptune do meet up every 36-ish years. So that's not the rare part, right? But they do always signal a very clear shift in the culture, in the societal collective vibe, right? So the last time that Saturn and Neptune did meet up, they weren't in an exact conjunction, right? So when they do meet up, they can be a few degrees apart, or they can be closer together, again, depending on their orbits. When they did meet up, they were within a few degrees of one another in Capricorn, and that was in 1989. And we saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the USSR, the Velvet Revolution. There was a lot of revolts around the world against government institutions, right? This kind of symbology of the Berlin Wall falling, it was a hard structure ruled by Saturn. Neptune, being the great dissolver that she is, it had to come down because symbolically it represented more than just the taking down of a wall, right? It shifted the culture. It shifted the vibe. And the reason that this one is so rare and exciting is because they will be in an exact conjunction, exact degree, exact seconds. So that conjunction is going to begin on February 13th, because right now we already have Neptune in Aries. She has officially kissed the Piscean era goodbye. Thank God. And she's been in Aries since January 26th. Now Saturn is going to follow on February 13th, and they will begin their conjunction. That conjunction is going to go on for a week until the 20th, when they come to the culmination of that conjunction, and they meet exactly at around 0 degrees and 45 seconds. Now, again, last year, we did have them loosely conjunct. Okay, so Neptune did shift into Aries March 30th of last year. And then we had Saturn follow 2 months later. I think it was May 24th or 25th. I think it was the 25th. And so they were loosely conjunct throughout the summer. But the fact that now they're moving within 2 weeks of one another, they're going to meet up at the exact degree in seconds. This is very interesting. And at the 0 degrees of Aries, this is known as the world axis point. I call it the inception point, because the 0 degrees of Aries begins the entire wheel, the entire zodiacal wheel, right? And in evolutionary astrology, we look at Aries as the baby, right? It is the birth, right? And we kind of go around the wheel, and Pisces kind of represents the old soul. Now, right in between those, right? If Pisces is the old soul, Pisces is transcendence. Pisces is where we kind of go back to where we came from, right? The ether, source. The 0 degrees of Aries is the inception point, or you could think of it as conception. It is where something new is seeded and will be birthed, and it will start an entirely new cycle or era. Now, I've seen a lot of astrologers, again, trying to track this back. I'm getting lots of different dates, but the most consistent one is that nailing down this conjunction at the 0 degrees, the world axis point, it's looking like that hasn't occurred in about 9,000 years. So again, this is rare. This is exciting, but this is also, we have no idea like what the hell this looks like, right? We are coming out of a Piscean era that has been incredibly foggy. And we are starting to see the rose-colored glasses finally come off. A lot of what was unearthed in the Piscean era. It was a lot of things that were known and felt, but couldn't necessarily be proven, right? Or couldn't be seen clearly. Now all of that is bleeding into this Aries era, where all of that is going to be seen. It's going to be in our faces. Like, Aries is very assertive. Aries also rules the head, right? So a lot of third eye activations and things like that. Like we're going to be seeing clearly. Now within this week of this massive conjunction that's happening, I'm calling that the event week. Smack dab in the middle of that, February 17th, is the Chinese New Year, and the fire horse energy comes in. So we're kind of in a triple fire year. We've got the one energy. So if you're a life path one, like me, or a horse like me, this is a very like extra boosted year. We have to align with the momentum, right? So we've got the one, we've got the fire horse, and now we've got this very dominant Aries era. And Aries is very similar to the one in the fire horse. So it's an action-packed year. It's going to be a year where we are going to feel this very visceral shift into just pure, raw, inspired action. There will be a lot of creativity this year, and it's going to feel a little bit different than the Neptunian, Piscean creativity, which is more about imagination and visualization and kind of the connection to something beyond yourself. It's beyond the five senses, right? It's like the sixth sense. So think downloads, imaginations, dreams, visions, intuitive knowings, very ethereal. That was the creativity of the Piscean era. The Aries era is very raw, passionate type of creativity. It's the instinctual execution of what we wish to do and what we wish to create. And so on that Chinese New Year, as the fire horse energy kicks in, Neptune and Saturn are going to be like this close to like making that exact conjunction. We also have the first solar eclipse, or the first eclipse in general of the year. It's like it just, this week in February is just wild, and this is why everybody's looking at it. It's going to be a new moon solar eclipse at 28 degrees Aquarius. Okay, so this is the prelude to the new axis, the new eclipse axis that will officially begin at the end of July when the North Node exits Pisces. It's like we can't get rid of this Pisces era. I always trust the cosmos because they are perfect in the way that they move. But holy shit. It's like the lingering Pisces energy just, it's just hanging on. So we're still going to have that North Node in Pisces until the end of July, in which it will move into Aquarius. This really dawns the new era because we have Pluto in Aquarius. The Aquarian energy is going to be really heavy. But this is our first eclipse, giving us a glimpse into this new kind of axis, right? What is fascinating to me, and I'll be doing a lot more like specific updates on these events, but that new moon solar eclipse in Aquarius takes us back to another chapter, which is February of 2018. We also had a new moon solar eclipse in Aquarius at almost the exact same degree. I think it was like 1 degree different in February of 2018. There's a lot of connection to 2018. So if, you feel into not only the last 9-year cycle, which did begin in 2017, but there's a lot of connection to 2018. This solar eclipse is going to take us back to February of that year. Later this year, at the end of April, when Uranus finally exits Taurus and moves into Gemini, that's completing an 8-year cycle that began in May of 2018. Now, Chiron, I'll get to this later in the year, Chiron has also been in Aries for 8 years. He's going to briefly dip into Taurus this summer for a few months before retrograding back into Aries, but then officially in 2027, Chiron will move into Taurus, and we'll enter a whole new kind of healing cycle with that. But Chiron also entered Aries back in May of 2018. So lots of strange connections to that year. This whole month is really taking me back to a lot of different chapters, like closing out the 9-year cycle, such a connection to 2018, which was such an important year, like in my own personal life. Just a full circle type of moment happening. And then all the Aries energy, it's like everything's been preparing us for this time. You know, like I said, Chiron been in Aries for 8 years, since 2018. So this collective healing around the wound of self-identity, the wound around self-autonomy, the empowerment of remembering, like Pisces remembers source. Pisces has the instinctual, visceral knowing and remembrance of where we come from, that we are all a part of source, that we are all one essentially, right? Collective consciousness is a real thing, unity consciousness. Everything is energy. Everything is connected. Pisces understands this in a very abstract kind of soul knowing type of way, but Aries lives it. Aries lives as the God self, not just knowing it, not just imagining it, not just connecting to it, but actually living, breathing, walking as the God self. And so it's like everything has been preparing us for this moment, right? With the extended Chiron and Aries transit, Chiron also has a strange orbit, so he can spend different amount of times in each sign. And this has been particularly long. I also think back to, 2023. That was when Saturn first entered Pisces, coming at the tail end of this Neptune Pisces era and being like, you guys got to bring it back down to earth. Like, you're all living up here and we got to ground this thing in. And Saturn really forced us to learn things like energetic boundaries and discernment, and really grounding spirituality into a very practical, embodied sense. He cut through the bullshit. He made us face the reality of what is. And, that all started in 2023. That was actually the first time that Pluto dipped into Aquarius as well. It was a really brief period of like 6 weeks where Pluto dipped into Aquarius, and then went back to Capricorn, obviously. But then it was during that time that the North Node entered Aries. I think it was the summer of 2023. So throughout the end of the second half of 2023 and all of 2024, we had the North Node in Aries. And I remember, looking at the eclipses during those times, and it was like so bizarre to me at the time. We were having so many eclipses in Aries. Like, again, thinking back to like March, April, May of 2023. This was when Saturn first entered Pisces. Pluto was briefly dipping into Aquarius. And I remember we had 2 back-to-back solar eclipses in Aries. One was a solar eclipse, and I think one was just a new moon, but it was at like the 1 degree, and then the other one was at the 29th degree. Like, it was activating the whole spectrum of Aries. Fast forward to 2024. We had the total solar eclipse in Aries, right? And that's very rare because we hardly ever get like a total solar eclipse. And if any of you got to see it that year, I made sure that I got to see it because it was kind of a once in a lifetime thing to witness. But it was on April 8th, 2024. Always remember that. And there was like 6 planets stacked in Aries at the time. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, what is the emphasis on Aries? And then obviously coming back around full circle to this moment with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction here at the 0 degrees, it's like everything has been leading us up to this. And so one of the things that I've been talking about in my sessions and like seminars is that I think within the Piscean era, there was this feeling, especially for a lot of light workers and those who have like been in this game a while, we all felt like, when is the finish line? Like, where is it? When are we done with this shit? And I think we all went through different phases of, it wasn't a giving up per se, but it was kind of like, we just have to let this thing play out. Like, there's nothing more we can do, right? Like, and And the reality that has been coming to me just with the transits and with the energies present is that all of this has been training to actually begin. And that's like a very daunting thought. That like took me a while to process that, because I was like, I'm ready to retire, like spiritually, you know, but jokingly, but it's just been a long haul, like depending, obviously, you know, no matter when you woke up, no matter when you kind of started your journey, whether that was a healing journey or an awakening journey or whatnot, it has been a long haul. You know, it made me, it's a real ending of the eras. And so there's a nostalgia this month as well. But the reality was like, we've been preparing to start. And I'm seeing this especially this month, right? It was literally, I think, the day Neptune moved into Aries, or the day after, when they, you know, officially put out the files, right? And it's still only half of the files, but, and, you know, I'm watching this like mass awakening happen, from these drops. And I think a lot of us are obviously happy that we're entering this kind of more mass awakened time. Again, the Neptune Aries conjunction is really going to inspire us of like, it's not enough to just know things. It's not enough to have knowledge or experience or information or awareness. It's not about the consuming of more knowledge. It's about, what are you going to do with it? Like, the question this year is going to become, what are we going to do individually and collectively? Like, it doesn't matter anymore about how much information you have. The information's always been there. You know, like, I remember going down the rabbit hole in 2011. Ironically, it was exactly when Neptune first entered Pisces that I actually like began the awakening journey. So this is like a real 15-year like full chapter moment for me of like, you know, that's when I first went down the rabbit hole. Like, it's been a while, you know, and there's been so much information and knowledge available even before 2011. But I was young at that time, so that was like when I first got, you know, in the game there. But it's almost this moment of like, you know, I'm happy that the collective consciousness is activating. But it's almost, again, this feeling of like, you know, where have you been? You know, it's not that it's ever too late. Everything is in divine timing, but it is a little bit of this feeling of like, well, you're late to the game, and what are we doing now? You know? And so I feel that this month it's a full chapter closing. It's a new era moment. It's a full circle moment. And that's really, I think, going to activate a lot in February, which I've kind of broken up the year into these milestones. And February is by far the activation month. It's the event month. What that means, what that looks like, you know, we'll have to see it as we experience it. But then I know for certain that April and May are acceleration months. So kind of like whatever activates now for you individually and collectively, by the time we get to April and May, that's going to go into hyperspeed. There's a pedal to the metal acceleration moment that happens then. And then by the time we get to August, we will have the North Node in Aquarius. Jupiter will be in Leo. Talk about that later. And the second round of eclipses. And that to me is a whole destiny plot twist that happens in August. And then the latter half of the year, like, you know, late September through December, we're going to kind of be in a huge integration emotionally, energetically, and physically. And so, but this is the month. Like, I think everybody feels it. Everybody feels like something is happening. And I know, again, for a long time, we've all been like, something's, you know, coming, something's going to happen. And there were events, but nothing compared to what is going on this month. So just to start out here, So first thing is, we had a full moon in Leo on the 1st. That was, again, really lighting up the Aquarian Leo axis, which will become our new eclipse axis starting in August. Well, again, kind of touching on it in February. And then we had Uranus go direct on the 3rd. And Uranus has been retrograde in the later degrees of Taurus. Again, Uranus is moving forward now and is preparing to finish out his transit in Taurus, which will end at the end of April. He'll move into Gemini officially. And this is closing out the cycle that began in May of 2018. This was also the transit that occurred during the Great Depression, little early years of World War II. There's a lot that has been disrupted and changed with this Uranus and Taurus transit. And now he's kind of marching through what we call the critical degrees. And the reason that this was so interesting is, when an outer planet, especially Uranus, right, is completing a transit and preparing to move into the next phase, he does not go quietly. He's not really a subtle guy. And he's going to make his point on the way out, right? And so I think we're going to start seeing that. But what was interesting is that this month, right? And so these first 2 weeks of February, what we basically have had is we had a parade of Aquarius planets. We had a huge stellium in Aquarius: Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Pluto. Now, as each of these, minus Pluto, because he moves real slow. The rest of these planets are slowly getting into the later degrees of Aquarius. Now, Aquarius is a fixed sign. Uranus is a fixed sign. So as each of these planets reaches the later degrees of Aquarius, they are each going to come into a hard square with Uranus and Taurus. Anytime you're having an interaction with Uranus, whether that be a conjunction, an opposition, or especially a square, there is volatility. There is a disruption. It's not necessarily that something crazy always happens, but I would call it more, there is something that becomes activated. Uranus is like electrical. Something is sparked. So either that spark can kind of come alive and activate something, or that spark can short circuit something, right? And so what we've had the past couple of days is Mercury being the first planet to come up into a square with Uranus and Taurus. Now, Mercury rules communications, right? Mercury in Aquarius is a lot around technology, the mass dissemination of information, pattern recognition, the voice of the collective of humanity really comes through Mercury and Aquarius, coming up into a square with Uranus and Taurus. Finances, financial markets, resources, stability, the things that also we want to break out of the status quo. We want to break out of the stagnation, what has become rigid, outdated, obsolete. So we've been having that Mercury-Uranus square the past few days. Obviously, there's a lot going on globally that I think really plays into this. And so then Mercury is going to enter Pisces later today. I will be doing, as a side note, so for those of you who really love astrology and kind of the deeper dives into like the energetics and the astrology of things, I will be posting like more kind of nuanced videos on my own YouTube. So I will put that link down below if you guys want to follow that channel. That's where I'll be posting more kind of nuanced specific videos on these certain transits and certain like upcoming events. And I will be talking about and probably be writing some more in-depth articles as well about Mercury and Pisces, because the Pisces energy, like, I love you, Pisces, but I just can't do it anymore. And it just seemed like we were almost there. Like we were almost going to be out of this like Piscean fog. I was okay with the North Node staying there. You know, it's a very like follow the destiny type of transit, and I'm good with that. But Mercury in Pisces is going to linger, obviously, throughout the month of February, and then it's going to go retrograde in Pisces. And then we're going to have it there for 2 more months. And it's not going to enter Aries until April 14th. Again, why I said April and May are more acceleration months. But I was like, oh, why did you do this to us? Why? And so I will be doing kind of a deeper dive on the symbolism and kind of what I'm gathering from why we are now going to have an extended retrograde of Mercury in Pisces, taking us back into the dream. There's always a reason. And so I think mentally and cognitively, there's going to be all this fire blazing around us, whether that be literal or figurative, right? And meanwhile, our mental bodies and our consciousness are going back into the dream. And that is purposeful. I think there's something to uncover there. There's something to retrieve there. There's something we need to piece together from the last era before we can officially jump into the new one. But nonetheless, we will be in the midst of this fast-paced paradigm that is coming in quickly. But we are still needing to dive back in to maybe what was lost, maybe what wasn't fully understood. There's something still there within the dream that we have to connect back with. And so that's going to be a lot of the Mercury and Pisces energy this month. Now, next week, Venus will follow. Venus will also enter Pisces. But Venus is exalted in Pisces. This is the real star-crossed lovers, fairy tale, ethereal type of love energy. And I think the world, we could use a slight bit of that minus the delusion. But maybe that's also about maintaining, right, with whatever happens this month. And again, this whole year, it's going to get intense. There's no letting up on the intensity. This isn't a rainbows and butterfly situation. We are just going to feel more autonomous, more courageous, more fearless within it. But that doesn't mean that this is going to be a cakewalk. It's just that we're going to finally feel emboldened and empowered enough to go through it. But Venus and Pisces might help us retain a little bit of that optimism, that real spiritual optimism, and kind of remember our humanity, that compassion and unconditional love is still the name of the game, no matter what this brings about. So we will have Mercury and Venus in Pisces. They will be conjunct one another next week. And this is right before Saturn enters Aries on the 13th, right? So, in all my sessions that I've been doing, for those who are doing the 2026 transit readings, what I'm really focused on, right, is where this is happening for you in your chart. So if you can locate 0 degrees of Aries in your chart, you will know the house that this is happening. For most of you, this will be the same house that Neptune and Saturn have been moving through for at least the last year or two. For some of you, it might begin an entirely new house. But regardless, this is an area of life where you are meant to experience the shift, where you are meant to experience this kind of this consciousness reset, this new era and paradigm. It's happening in the house that it was designed for you. Like, you're at the exact age that you should be, you're in the exact present moment that you should be, and it's all been designed purposefully, right? Our scripts were written exactly as they needed to be written. So whatever house that may be for you, this is a core part of what I believe your ultimate mission and purpose is. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. The clarity will come. The kind of bam of this month will make it very, very obvious. And I think that this will also, of course, be very intertwined with that new moon solar eclipse at 28 degrees Aquarius, which falls smack dab in the middle of this kind of like second Big Bang moment, because that's what it feels like to me. It's like a second Big Bang. The conception point, the seeding, there is something that is going to be birthed that feels very raw, a little bit unrefined, but that is kind of the nature of Aries, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? South Node in Virgo for the past year. It doesn't have to be perfect. You cannot have it all planned out. You cannot have all the answers. You can't have it all make sense. Aries, it's an instinct. It's a very raw, instinctual energy where you don't necessarily know what it all looks like. You don't know really what the plan is per se, but you just know that there's a direction. You have a core sense of self that wants to be expressed, that wants to act, and that wants to create. And that is the moment here. And so this new moon solar eclipse in Aquarius, I wanted to look at the degree of this, right? And again, for those of you who want more like deep dive videos, I'm going to do an entirely separate video on my own YouTube about this, because during that solar eclipse, it's going to be in a direct square with Uranus and Taurus. Okay, so as these parade of planets, right? First was Mercury making that square to Uranus. This weekend through early next week, as Venus gets through the later degrees of Aquarius, she will also start squaring Uranus and Taurus, okay? We're talking about the restructuring of collective value. What do we value as a humanity? What is valuable to the whole? What is valuable to the future? That's going to be the question marks. And then as we get to the new moon solar eclipse in Aquarius, the sun and moon will both be at the later degrees, squaring Uranus and Taurus. So it's just like, what's the vibe? And Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. So Uranus being the ruler of this new moon solar eclipse and being in a square to it from the critical degrees of Taurus is like, he wants to bring something to our attention. And again, we're going to have to look at the archetypes here. Taurus, what is valuable? What are things worth? What is your body worth, right? Body being your physical time, effort, and labor that you give. What is it worth? What is money worth, right? I mean, I wrote a whole deep dive article on just the astrological patterns in terms of financial events. You will almost always see Taurus and or Aquarius involved, right? Because there's this sense of understanding of like what we all as a collective determine is valuable, or what we agree is valuable, is what becomes valuable. It's not that, these commodities or assets or resources hold value unless we agree that it does, unless it serves some sort of greater purpose. We also probably are going to go through a reshuffling of determining value, worth. I definitely can see instability in financial markets happening, a lot of instability in terms of assets, whatever that may be, hard-backed assets, digital assets, theoretical assets, right? I think there's going to be a huge kind of shock factor to this eclipse. And so I wanted to just, share the degree of this eclipse. This is one of my favorite books. If you guys are interested in the degree theory. So this is the 360 Degrees of Your Star Destiny. This is by Elias Lonsdale. I've had this forever. And this is more into the Sabian symbols of the degrees. But in terms of degree theory, right, 28th degree is very prominent. Now, again, we see a pattern that has emerged. I love looking at the patterns. For the past 6 months, I believe, 5 months, we have had every new moon at the 28th degree. That is a very, and this will continue till April. Okay, so I think this started back in September, if I'm not mistaken, September or October. But every new moon has been at 28 degrees. Okay, 28th degree ruled by Cancer, the mother. It is the degree of, also known as the abundance degree, the money degree. So, okay, Cancer, right? The mother, the lineage, the connection to our soul in many ways, the connection to love, nurturing, safety, compassion, the idea of family, the idea of tribe, community. That is very Cancerian energy. Cancer is, by all means, I think, the most important archetype when it comes to money. We always kind of go to Taurus straight away, but money is water. That's why every phrase we have surrounding money is about water, right? Liquidation, money flow, currency. It's all water related. And Cancer is the waters of the womb. She is who literally creates through the waters. She is how money flows, right? 28th degree, abundance degree. So I find that very interesting. Just off the bat, that's just a little bit of degree theory. But in terms of the Sabian symbol, so we do round up in Sabian symbols. So I'm going to read the Aquarius 29th degree for this particular new moon solar eclipse. And it says, it is called the sound of dripping water echoing through a great stone room. I can hear my own thoughts, my own ramblings, my own last moment in the gap wonderings. I can heed the echo of what I have come to inside. I am undisturbed by any outside forces, no matter how insistent they become. I am focused on the unfocused. I am busy with what is not so busy. I am letting go of the way it seemed and making way for what it might become. I don't have any idea what to do with this vast space of mine. It's in a whole other dimension from what I see around me. The only thing that appeals to me really is to dive in here farther and farther and see what happens. A man or a woman can get lost here. Worlds of the past can fade. You can give up a whole lifetime and nobody will ever know. There's no time, no sequence. Nothing leads to anything else. Yet it's not just drifting, it's a hanging loose. No, I am, when it comes down to it, up to something in here. I'm cooking up all kinds of things. I'm inventing myself to be who I want to be, who I have never been. I'm opening up a space for something that will arise if I don't try to mess with it and do stuff around it. So it's a matter of letting a lot settle so something else forms that happens on the inside and has nothing to do with the outside. My outer world is a throwaway. But way far in here, I have been dreaming, envisioning, hoping, wishing, remembering, and forgetting since the start of everything. I must admit that this is the only way I care to spend my time. It's the only place I am dropped in enough to breathe with all those forces that are connected to me and that are not going to come through unless I can sit here and sit with them, tune in and pass the time. The whole wide world is inside of me. Everything I meet anywhere, it's all in here. I don't have to go anywhere. I just need to let myself be. And so I think that's another little layer there of just the authenticity of who we are. Taking out the global context of that solar eclipse, I think on a personal level, it's activating this deep sense of authenticity of who we really are and what we're here to express. And that might be percolating, right? I think within ourselves, within our blueprints, this whole new version of us, which again, all the snake year and 2025, and we are still technically in the last moments of the snake year, there is a deep shedding of these old identities, of this old path, of this old experience that has to come to a close so that the real selves can come through. And so this is just a really interesting month, an action-packed month, an exciting month. But again, there is a lot of intensity. So, for those of you that do feel like it all seems a bit too much, or you feel like there's just a lot of energy happening and you're not sure what to do with it. My best guidance for the year, especially with the Aries energy, the fire horse, the 1 year, is to pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We are just beginning the race this month. So don't try to go too hard, too fast. Pace yourselves. I think this year is also about really taking care of the body, really taking care of the health and wellness. We kind of learned that through the eclipse cycle last year of Virgo and Pisces, which was not easy on the immune systems or the energetic bodies. We really need to make sure that we are operating optimally. So that means taking care of yourself, giving yourself what you know that you need, and you need to make time for it. We have to prioritize ourselves this year. The horse, Aries, it's all very self-oriented. We are always to be in service. We are always to be sharing our gifts and skills, doing what we can to help others or just to be in service to the whole. But at the end of the day, this is the year to focus on self. Whatever you need to be functioning optimally, to have joy, balance, happiness, to have a holistic sense of self, that is what we need to do. Pace yourselves. It will be lots of tests of patience this year. Like, you're just going to have to try again. If you fall off the horse, you literally need to get back on it. Don't give up. Don't rush. Don't be impatient. Just really make sure that as we're moving forward, you're integrating. So I do think like having a really balanced sense of self, spiritual disciplines will be very important. However that works for you. If you need to change them up, change them up. But we will see what happens in Feb. It's going to activate a lot. And so by the time we get to March, I'm sure we'll be having an entirely different conversation. But we will have another eclipse in March and a lot of even more kind of fast-paced energy, but there will be a sense of integration in March and also a little bit of experimentation where we're kind of like getting the sea legs. We've almost been like on bed rest for 15 years and now all of a sudden we're getting ready to run a marathon. So a little bit of a visceral shift, and March is going to kind of be where we're really getting into gear, doing some experimentation, figuring out what works and figuring out how we're going to proceed to prepare for the accelerations that are coming in April and May. So happy February to you all. Love you guys. Of course, if you want to or are guided to any sessions, seminars, they are on the website. And again, I'll drop down my personal YouTube at the bottom if you guys are interested in more kind of specialized astrology content. So happy February, everybody. Love you.